Hello, and I am on test server playing the Awakening Wizard Rework. So I'm only going to talk about Awakening as there weren't really any notable changes that came to Secession. Um, so I will talk objectively about the changes that Awakening received first, and then I will talk about my personal opinion on the changes. So the first notable change that we received was the cooldown of Aqua Bomb was changed to 5 seconds. Oops. That's one of the new skills that has a lot of overlap with the input, so I use it by mistake. So anyways, that's the first notable change. The second notable change that I just demonstrated inadvertently is the new skill that is done by pushing W followed by right mouse button. And this one does 1,137 damage times 10, critical hit rate 50%, accuracy 30%, and has a cooldown of 17 seconds. Now, you do a slow dash forward, followed by a very large AoE, and you have super armor from the time you register the key input to when the damage finishes. And here's what it looks like if I use the skill and then try to dodge out. So there's a minor gap in protection after that. Now the next notable change that we received was we were given a new skill that is done by pushing S and Q. There's a slight delay followed by, well, the skill. The critical hit rate that used to be on Chilling Wave, 8% for 10 seconds, was moved to this skill. This skill has 100% crit, 30% accuracy, and the hit damage is 981 times 3 max 4 hits. However, this is pet damage. In PvP, this only has its damage reduced by 10%, which is fairly typical with pet damage things. However, the effective AP that is applied to it is far lower than it would be if it weren't pet damage. The next change, which is not notable but still a change, is the flows of Aqua Jail, of Hellfires, and of Cataclysm were all combined into the skills. Now, I'm 90% sure they did this just so they have more room to work with, because nothing about the flows changed. It's still cast by the pet. It does the same damage. It still does pet damage too, of course. And it still has the same size of AoE. So yeah, nothing has changed other than the fact that it is now integrated into the skill instead of being a separate skill that you learn. The Chilling Wave flow was not integrated into the skill. So again, I'm assuming that it only had to do with them needing extra space. Hopefully we'll get one more skill then, seeing that. I could also see it being in preparation for them adding separate flows to these skills. Now the final notable change that we received was a new skill that we activate by pushing S followed by spacebar. It's very similar in movement distance and in wind-up animation. However, this wind-up animation is slower to the Earthquake Evade in Secession, and it also has a 15-second cooldown. However, this is a hard cooldown as opposed to a soft cooldown. With Earthquake Evade, you can use it when it's on cooldown, but it will not be protected, and the backward movement will be a lot shorter. So now for my personal thoughts. I'm not going to. Actually, I'll talk about my personal thoughts on each individual skill, and then talk about my general thoughts. It's kind of hard to separate them, but anyway, the Aquapon change is only a positive. I don't see it fundamentally changing our playstyle in any way, but lower cooldowns are only a good thing. So yeah, not really much to be said about that. Now, this new W right mouse button skill, I think it would be useful if it could be used as a flow after Aqua Jail, similar to how you can use Magma Bomb as a standalone with S right mouse button. Or you can bypass the wind up animation by holding right mouse button after Hellfire or after Aqua Bomb. And the reason I think it would be a lot more useful in that state is because it doesn't give us anything that we don't already have. We have a lot of super armor. In fact, I think we have too much. We have a lot of reasonably large AoEs, and we have a lot of slow movement. This, if anything, is less useful due to the fact that it has gaps in protection and no lingering protection. Unlike a lot of our other abilities, very long lingering super armor on Bull Lights, medium long lingering super armor on Cataclysm, and we also cannot dodge out of it, unlike Aqua Gel. So yeah, it gives us more of what we have, which is not needed. Now the S plus Q skill, I actually really like this skill. However, that being said, we already had area denial in the form of lava field. I do really like skills like this on witch and wizard classes, but once again, it gave us something that we already have. And even though I like these types of skills, I do not like pet damage as a concept. I see no reason that it as a mechanic exists in the game in any capacity. I think that if they, because it used to do full damage, at least as far as I know, and it did a lot of damage. Rather than them nerfing it by introducing a totally new mechanic with the flat pet damage, I think they should have just either increased the PvP damage reduction, which would have fixed the problem, or just lowered the damage of it. Either of those ultimately would have worked. I'd rather them increase the PvP damage reduction, just because then it wouldn't end up being a PvE nerf. But either way, the point is that I think that the way they went about nerfing it by introducing a new mechanic was not only unnecessary, but only makes it more difficult for them to balance. So a great skill, but the fact that it's pet damage, I wish it would just be lower damage, but apply the full damage. I see no reason for pet damage to exist. Now, the S spacebar skill. I think I see what they were trying to do with it. However, let's look at what this skill really does. First, I will demonstrate using this skill, followed by buffered input into Cataclysm. There is approximately a 1 second break in the super armor that we got from the S spacebar skill and the super armor that we received with Cataclysm. Now, I don't think this would be a problem if it weren't for the very long wind-up animation that basically announces what is going on with the skill. I think it's something that can definitely be used at long range if we just want a bit more backward movement, but why wouldn't we just use our dodge then? It's basically the same speed. The dodge may even be a bit faster. It's also similar speed to simply putting your weapon away and running. And on top of that, the movement is extremely clunky. Unlike Earthquake Evade, which it seems to just be a reskinned animation of, the windup is longer, and as soon as you register the key input, you cannot redirect it by moving your camera. So even if you haven't started moving yet, if you move your camera, it's not going to do anything to redirect the input. I'm assuming this is something that will be changed and is just a product of this being clearly very rushed. The skills don't even have markers. Um, but anyways, this again gives us more of what we already have. We already have slow movement. Um, we, I mean, even if it would be a lot better if it were, let's say, iframe, but even then, we already have our teleports. And rather than giving us another version, in this case, a worse version of what we already have, I would much rather see us get something that we don't have. Something that instead of making us slightly stronger where we are already strong, would help address some of our weaknesses, namely lack of sustained movement. So I think that if this were a much shorter cooldown, didn't have a long wind-up animation, did not have protection, and no, I don't think it needs to have longer movement if it doesn't have the animation, but either way, I think that would be a whole lot better. It's something that we could use for positioning, for proper disengages, similar to Secession Destruction Earth Response. Um, I guess what I'm trying to get at, and now I'm getting into the general issues with the class, is so to take us in 1v1 where we're weakest. We can perform remarkably well against non-grab classes, even in 1v1, due to the fact that we are often very much a CC threat. We have some protected CC, we have 100% super armor uptime, and while we risk getting damaged through super armor, the fact that we have so much of it, we can often exploit the gaps in other classes' protection in ways that, if we can read the opponent well, let us do quite well. However, it I know it's not this simple, however, it can a lot of times feel like it is an auto lose against any grab class. Now, this wasn't always the case. If you go back to the early days of the game, classes with grabs generally had appropriate limitations placed on the rest of their kit. You didn't have grabs paired with crazy high mobility. You didn't have grabs paired with, yeah, but you get it. And the real issue um, is that when you have a class with an abundance of protected mobility into a grab, much less a ranged magnet grab, there isn't really much that a slow class that sits in super armor all the time can do about that. So I think that if this skill, instead of being a very slow super armor dodge with a long cooldown, if it were a short cooldown, unprotected, maybe not necessarily spammable, or let's say if it could be something that at great stamina cost, um, it would have to be more than 200, I think, to keep it balanced, were usable on cooldown with no protection and were super armor when it did not have, or when it was off cooldown. I think that could be something that we could make great use of. Just because it would be something that would kind of supplement our dodge and hopefully be kind of an improved version of it, but again, at greater stamina cost to help us with positioning, to help us with disengages, to help us be able to do something about the relentless kind of onslaught of a class with a lot of protected mobility into a grab. Because again, even in Wizard's weakest area, we again 1v1, we perform quite well against certain matchups having to do with just the fact that we can sit in super armor. We do not need more of that. In fact, I don't see many cases at all that I would use the new dodge because of the gap in protection against a class that doesn't have a grab, because it's slow, they'll just engage us and CC us out of it. It's extremely predictable, to say the least. So I just don't see it, especially at close range, getting any significant use, really. If it were faster, it would get use. If it were an iframe, I don't think that should be the case, though, but then it would get more use, because again, it's more of what we have. But yeah, whatever. I think that weaknesses and natural counters are a thing. However, there's a limit to the degree that something should feel like an unwinnable matchup. And I know that grabs tend to be the weakness of everyone, and this seems to be a lot less of an issue with Wizard's design than with grab. However, the fact that grabs seem to be becoming the standard, not only grabs but range grabs, no matter how much it seems like it's totally inappropriate for grab to be a thing. I think that classes having more to properly defend against that really, really does need to be a thing. Now, I don't think that wizard classes should have high mobility. I don't think that wizard classes should have a whole bunch of skills that are cast extremely quickly. However, I will acknowledge the importance of things like this in a game full of classes with mobility so fast they're basically only limited by the speed of causality, and range magnet grabs paired with that. So yeah, I think that the big takeaway from this is that the changes, they gave us more of what we already have. We don't need that. These will make us slightly stronger at what we're already very strong at, but no stronger in the areas where we are incredibly weak. I think that we need less super armor, less big AoE damage as standalone skills, and I see that because as a flow, this could be incredibly useful. Less slow, long wind-up movement. We need more consistent movement, similar to how in Secession we have the longer range destruction Earth response that has super armor. And even though it has super armor, which again we have a lot of here, we don't have a lot of it in, or at least compared to an Awakening, we don't have a lot of it in Secession. So I think that that is a very appropriate addition to Secession. I think also the fact that it moves you a decent distance, similar to like a dodge and a half of pre-awakening. I think that makes it a lot more useful. I think the fact that it's a 4-second cooldown makes it a lot more useful, and the fact that it's an immediate activation, unlike our new S spacebar, makes it very useful. So it's not that super armor dodges are bad, they're really good. It's just that if they're implemented the way that our S spacebar was implemented, on a class that already has an abundance of super armor, it doesn't do anything for it. So, yep, I think we need to. I think they really need to stop giving us more of what we have and start giving us meaningful mechanical changes that would let a skilled player use them in a way that makes up for some of Awakening Wizard's weaknesses. Now, my ideas would be, I guess I kind of already talked about them, but to sum them up in one more concise thingy. I think that the W right mouse button skill should still be usable as a standalone, but should also be usable as a flow after Aqua Jail, and witches could be used as a flow after Thunderstorm, maybe. I think that the SQ skill, again, I really like it, even though it's more of what we have. However, I think it should do lower damage, but not be pet damage. Pet damage, really, I do not see why it's a thing to begin with, and I definitely don't see why a new skill would make use of it. I think that the S spacebar dodge should be very low cooldown, but not have any protection, or should be usable on cooldown with no protection at a great stamina cost, and also should have possibly a shorter wind-up animation similar to that of Evade Earthquake in Secession. Now, again, I think that these changes would have been very good 4 years ago. But the style of Awakening Wizard is painfully outdated. Teleport back then was very strong. It moves us quite far, it moves us extremely far, and classes didn't have the light speed protected movement that so many of them seem to be given now. So the idea of them engaging was something that, yeah, sure, some dash classes like Musa and Mewa could, however, they couldn't just grab you. So them re-engaging, they could apply a lot of damage, which was very threatening. However, it's a much more balanced kind of matchup. And a class that had a grab, they generally wouldn't have crazy fast and or protected movement. So I'm still a CC threat to them. However, now there are some classes that can chase you through teleport practically at the same speed that your teleport executes, and then you don't really have anything that you can do for the next 7 or so seconds, and this does not count as something. So, yeah, I think that the style, Secession address a lot of this, and I think that they should kind of take a lesson from how they dealt with movement in Secession. The style of Awakening is so outdated. The reason that Secession is better with that is we have the consistent movement of a low cooldown Earth response. We have the movement of the dodge that has a 3-second cooldown. It's unprotected but very useful for positioning, where it's a very fast double dodge. We have the supplemental movement of Earthquake Evade. We have the Split Teleport. Now, while we are still weak to grab classes, we have kind of a recourse. I don't think that we are necessarily that much weaker to grab classes than a lot of other classes are, maybe slightly, but that's fine, that's reasonable. We can still do something about it. And the amount of additional mobility that we were given to really make that possible, when coupled with the fact that secession skills are a lot faster than awakening skills, should really give them an idea of the type of changes that have to come to awakening to make it something that is a lot more um, a lot more useful considering the current state of things. So yeah, I kind of thought I wanted to make this a short thingy, but when stuff is as complicated as this, I don't really think there's a such thing as it being a short thingy. So yeah, they. Oh yeah, I guess I was talking about what I think should be done, having to do with the dodge. I already went over that. So I think that we should also be given the split teleport in Awakening. If they don't want to tweak the dodge in the way that I mentioned. And the reason I say that is, well, the split teleport isn't perfect for dealing with grabs. The fact that we have two things instead of one thing that we can use to attempt to bait a grab out and put it in cooldown is something that is only extremely helpful. I definitely think that it could become excessive pretty quickly if they gave us the split teleport plus the secession Earth's response plus the buff version of this ability, just because of how much super armor we have. You don't want a class that has, well, they kind of seem to with some of these they've released, but in the interest of maintaining balance and having a class that is not used as the benchmark that other classes are buffed up to being as strong as, but having one that is a bit more reasonable, I think that split teleport alone, and maybe some more modest changes to our S spacebar skill would be good, or if they don't want to give us a split teleport, something that allows our S spacebar skill to be more consistent movement rather than a slow super armor that really does nothing to compensate for where we're weak. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. Honestly, this very long video can be summed up by saying stop giving us what we already have an abundance of, and start giving us something that something that we don't have. We don't have consistent movement, and that is exactly what we need. Giving us more protected super arm, giving us more protected AoE skills, giving us more super armor, giving us more slow movement. That makes us better at what we're already good at. That's what we don't need. That's exactly what we don't need because we are incredibly good at what we're already good at. However, the weaknesses that we do have are quite debilitating, and having something that is not intrinsically strong against, let's say, grab classes like a spammable iframe, but something that can be used skillfully by an experienced player, like unprotected movement is something that I think would only be a welcome change, rather than saying, oh, you're suddenly strong against this thing that you were previously weak against. It's, oh, you are still weak against it, just like secession is still weak against grab. However, you have something that you can do about it, because it really is quite a helpless situation to be against a Lightspeed engaged grab class. And I know Witch and Wizard are not alone with that. However, the reason I'm emphasizing that so much is because fast engaged grab seems to be the standard now. I don't think that should be the case. I don't think that these changes that I'm proposing would be reasonable if that weren't the case. However, if that's what we have to work with, then I think the changes that we propose should have all of that in mind. I guess that's the video.